They're so puny. These filthy humans have no place fighting alongside superior warrior races, Alara shouted, shoving Joseph hard into the dirt. The human soldier barely came up to the hulking Wagnir's chest. He quickly scrambled back to his feet amidst the jeering laughter of the other Wagnir soldiers. Rage simmered inside Joseph. He was sick of the constant disrespect from these arrogant aliens. Humanity had spread to the stars, forging alliances and colonizing new worlds, but not every species welcomed them. Here on planet Zephyria, home to the mighty Wagnir, most saw humans as weak and inferior. Standing over 8 feet tall with rippling muscles and armored hides, the Wagnir towered over humans. They scoffed at humanity's small stature and delicate appearance. Joseph gritted his teeth. 3 tours with the Zephyrian peacekeepers, and he still faced daily discrimination. Wagnir soldiers accidentally bumped him in the mess hall. They forgot to include his rack during bunk inspections. They laughed when he trained, mocking his feeble human strength. Only his lightning reflexes and peerless aim earned any grudging respect. "Say that again," Joseph said, voice low and dangerous as he stepped towards Alara. "Call me filthy one more time." Alara chuckled, her sharp teeth flashing. "The human's got some fire. How cute. Be careful, little Joseph. You might get hurt playing with the big kids." The Wagnir lunged forward, intending to easily pin Joseph. But the human dodged with surprising speed. He ducked under her beefy arm and hammered precise strikes into her unarmored sides. Alara roared in shocked rage. Powerful punches whooshed over Joseph's head as he weaved and slipped around her, landing stinging jabs and kicks. The once laughing crowd fell into a stunned silence. The fight lasted only moments before their sergeant broke it up. But damage was done. A lowly human had fought a Wagnir warrior to a standstill, and Alara was humiliated. News spread like wildfire through the compound. A human that could match a Wagnir in close combat? Impossible and unacceptable. The simmering resentment many Wagnir held burst into open hostility. Anti-human sentiment grew. Joseph's commanders assigned him extra duties and dreaded night patrols. He knew their aim was to grind him down or get him killed. But the real danger came from a faction of Wagnir extremists. They viewed humanity as vermin despoiling their planet. Attacks against human outposts and ships around Zephyria spiked. The extremists wanted to drive the humans off Zephyria by any means. As the violence escalated, Joseph realized he needed to act fast. Unless he could ease tensions and prove humanity's worth as allies, a deadly conflict would erupt between their species. He swore to hunt down the Wagnir rebels to protect his fellow humans. He would show Alara and the other Wagnir that strength comes in many forms. Joseph was determined to prevent all-out war, even if he had to do it one flabbergasted alien soldier at a time. Joseph knew he had to act fast. The rebel attacks were escalating, and tensions between humans and Wagnir threatened to explode into all-out war. He needed allies, and he needed them now. That's when he met Talon, a young Wagnir soldier with a different perspective. Talon had seen Joseph fight firsthand and respected his abilities. More than that, Talon believed in the importance of the human-Wagnir alliance. He knew that divided, both their species would fall. "I want to help you investigate these rebels," Talon said, his deep voice rumbling. "My people are blinded by prejudice, but I see the truth. We need each other." Joseph clasped Talon's massive paw, sealing their partnership. Together, they began chasing down leads on the rebel activities. They questioned informants in seedy Zephyrian bars, hacked into rebel communications networks, and pieced together intel from scattered skirmishes. The clues all pointed to one place, the remote Zephyrian highlands, a rugged region of soaring peaks and hidden valleys. Joseph and Talon geared up and embarked on a recon mission deep into rebel territory. For 3 days, they hiked through the unforgiving terrain, skirting perilous cliffs and pushing through howling wind and sleet. Joseph's endurance and Talon's strength were put to the test as they climbed to dizzying heights where the air grew thin. On the 4th day, disaster struck. As they traversed a narrow mountain pass, A hail of blaster fire rained down on them from above. It was an ambush. A heavily armed rebel patrol had them dead to rights. Joseph and Talon dove for cover behind wind-scoured boulders as energy bolts crackled and sizzled all around them. They were pinned down and outnumbered, with sheer cliffs at their backs. The only way out was through the rebels. "Looks like we'll be fighting side by side sooner than we thought," Talon said wryly, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "Just like old times," Joseph replied with a grim smile, slamming a fresh power cell into his own weapon. Then together they burst from cover, all guns blazing. Joseph laid down suppressing fire, forcing the rebels to keep their heads down as Talon charged up the slope with a roar. Joseph marveled at the way Talon shrugged off hits that would have smashed a human flat. Even heavier weapons struggled to pierce Talon's thick hide as he closed in and engaged the rebels in brutal close combat. Joseph scrambled from boulder to boulder, using the terrain and his tactical instincts to flank the enemy positions. His precise shots took down rebel after rebel, while Talon scattered their formation like a living battering ram. It was a hard-fought battle, but through teamwork and tenacity, Joseph and Talon emerged victorious. As the last rebel fell, Joseph saw a newfound respect in Talon's eyes. The young Wagner clasped forearms with Joseph in the warrior's grip of his people. "I'm glad you're on my side, Joseph," Talon said sincerely. "I see now why the rebels fear you." Among the fallen rebels, they found a commander still clinging to life. Joseph and Talon interrogated him roughly, demanding the location of the rebel stronghold. At last, the commander broke. "The base!" he spat, coughing up blood. "It's in the mountains, a bunker complex, hidden." The rebel expired before he could say more. But it was enough. Joseph and Talon now knew their target, and more than ever they knew they would have to rely on each other to destroy it, before the rebels could launch their devastating attack on the humans. Joseph and Talon trudged into the bustling command center of the Zephyrian base, their uniforms caked with mud and sweat. Colonel Hawkins looked up from his holographic display, his weathered face creasing into a frown. "Report," he barked. Joseph stepped forward. "Sir, we've neutralized a rebel stronghold in the highlands. We believe it was their main base of operations." Talon nodded, his massive frame dwarfing the human soldiers around him. "The rebels were planning a major offensive against human outposts. We stopped them just in time." Hawkins grunted. "Good work, but we've got bigger problems here." Before he could elaborate, shouts erupted from the courtyard outside. Joseph rushed to the window, his eyes widening at the chaos below. Humans and Wagner were locked in a vicious brawl, fists and claws flying. "Damn it," Hawkins growled. "It's been building to this for days. Let's move." They sprinted down to the courtyard. Joseph tried to push his way through the melee, but a familiar roar stopped him cold. Ilara burst through the crowd, her eyes locked on Joseph with murderous intent. "You," she snarled. "This is all your fault, human." She lunged, her massive fist catching Joseph square in the jaw. He staggered back, tasting blood. Ilara pressed her advantage, raining down blows. Joseph's combat training kicked in as he desperately tried to fend her off. "Ilara, stop!" he shouted between strikes. "This isn't the way!" But Ilara was beyond reason. Joseph's vision blurred as another punch connected. He stumbled, knowing he couldn't last much longer against her onslaught. Suddenly, a thunderous bellow cut through the din. Talon shoulder-checked Ilara, sending her sprawling. He planted himself between her and Joseph, chest heaving. "Enough!" Talon roared, his voice carrying across the entire courtyard. "Look at yourselves. Is this what we've become?" The fighting slowly died down as all eyes turned to Talon. He pointed at Joseph, who was struggling to his feet. "This human fought by my side against the rebels," Talon declared. "He showed more courage and skill than many Wagner I've known. It's time we looked past our prejudices and saw the strength in our differences." A hush fell over the crowd. Ilara stared at Talon, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. In the silence, Colonel Hawkins' voice rang out. "All personnel stand down immediately." Loyal soldiers from both species moved to restore order. Joseph stepped forward, wiping blood from his lip. "I know many of you doubt humans," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "But together, we just dealt a crippling blow to the rebels. Imagine what we could accomplish if we truly united." The tension in the air was palpable as humans and Wagner alike pondered his words. Alara's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. "Stand down," she growled to her followers. "We'll settle this another way." As the crowd dispersed, Colonel Hawkins addressed the remaining soldiers. "A joint tribunal will convene to address these issues. We'll forge a new command structure, one that respects both our peoples." He turned to Joseph and Talon. "You two will represent your respective species in the negotiations." Joseph nodded, wincing at the movement. The wounds from the fight were nothing compared to the challenges that lay ahead. But as he looked at Talon, he saw a glimmer of hope. If they could overcome their differences, perhaps there was a chance for all of them. The base slowly returned to order, but the undercurrent of tension remained. Joseph knew the real work was just beginning. As he headed to the med bay to patch himself up, he steeled himself for the difficult days to come. The fate of the Alliance hung in the balance, and he was determined to see it through. The tribunal chamber buzzed with tension as Joseph took his seat. Across the room, Alara's massive frame dwarfed the human-sized chair she occupied. Colonel Hawkins called the proceedings to order, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We're here to address the ongoing issues between our forces," Hawkins stated. "Let's keep this civil." A Wagner captain stood, muscles rippling. "Civil, your reckless tactics got 3 of my soldiers killed in the Gorash Valley." "Because your troops ignored direct orders," a human lieutenant shot back. "If they'd held position—" "Enough," Hawkins barked, "one at a time." For hours, grievances poured forth. Humans decried Wagner brutality. Wagner mocked human frailty. Joseph gripped the edge of the table, squeezing hard. "We must work together," he insisted during a lull. "Our differences—" "Shut your mouth, weakling!" a Wagner soldier bellowed. Others joined in, drowning Joseph out. Alara rose, towering over the assembly. "The human speaks truly of differences. They are soft, fragile, a liability in battle." Shouts of agreement swelled from the Wagner contingent. Colonel Hawkins hit his fist on the table. "Order! I said order, damn it!" The chamber erupted. Insults flew. A human officer lunged at a sneering Wagner, only to be hauled back by his companions. Joseph buried his face in his hands. This was a disaster. "Silence!" The roar shook the walls. All eyes turned to Talon, standing tall. "Have you forgotten?" he demanded. "While you bicker, Joseph and I destroyed the rebel stronghold. His tactics saved Wagner lives." Talon locked eyes with a scarred Wagner sergeant. "Remember the canyon ambush? Joseph's marksmanship dropped 5 snipers before they could target you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Talon pressed on, recounting Joseph's exploits. The mood shifted. Younger Wagner, who'd fought alongside humans, nodded in agreement. Joseph saw his chance. He stood, meeting Alara's gaze. "We don't have to like each other, but we must respect each other. I propose a challenge. The Gauntlet." He outlined his plan for a multi-stage combat trial. Human and Wagner teams would face grueling tests, forging a new command structure through merit alone. A hush fell over the chamber. Colonel Hawkins stroked his chin. "Interesting. Very interesting." Alara's eyes narrowed. "You'd risk everything on trials?" "I would," Joseph said, "to prove we're stronger together." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a grizzled Wagner major grunted. "I say we do it. Put these humans to the test." Slowly, heads began to nod. Within the hour, the broad strokes were hammered out. As the tribunal adjourned, the base buzzed with anticipation. Joseph found Talon in the corridor. "Thanks for the save in there." Talon clasped his shoulder. "You've more than earned it. Now teach me your tricks. I intend to win this gauntlet." Across the compound, seasoned human operatives drill Alara on infiltration techniques. She snarls in frustration, but her eyes gleam with dedication. The gauntlet looms. Joseph knows the coming days will push both species to their limits. But as he watches humans and Wagnir training side by side, he dares to hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they can forge something greater than either race alone. The gauntlet began at dawn. Joseph Gordon stood shoulder to shoulder with Alara, Talon, and a handful of human operatives as the transport ship's bay doors opened. Cold mountain air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and frost. "Last one to the checkpoint buys the drinks," Joseph quipped, adjusting his pack. Alara snorted. "Save your breath, human. You'll need it." They leapt from the craft, boots crunching on fresh snow. Joseph's team fanned out, eyes scanning the rugged terrain. Jagged peaks loomed on all sides, their slopes dotted with dense forests and treacherous ravines. "Move out," Joseph ordered. "Keep low and watch for hostiles." They pushed forward, the mixed team quickly finding its rhythm. Human agility complemented Wagnir's strength as they navigated the unforgiving landscape. Joseph's mind raced, plotting the safest route through a maze of potential ambush points. On the third day, disaster struck. As they forded a raging river, the current swept 2 human operatives off their feet. Joseph plunged into the icy water without hesitation. He grabbed one flailing soldier while Alara snagged the other. Together, they hauled their teammates to safety. "Quick thinking," Alara grudgingly admitted, helping Joseph wring out his soaked uniform. "We're stronger together," Joseph replied, teeth chattering. "Now let's find shelter before we freeze." They pressed on, scaling near vertical cliffs and evading simulated enemy patrols. Joseph's tactical acumen shone as he guided the team through treacherous passes, always one step ahead of their pursuers. On the 5th day, they encountered their greatest challenge yet. A pack of Zephyrian dire wolves, each the size of a small car, stalked the team through a narrow canyon. Exhausted and low on supplies, they couldn't outrun the beasts. "We're surrounded," Talon growled, hefting his weapon. Joseph's eyes darted around the canyon. "Wait, I have an idea." He quickly outlined his plan. The team worked furiously, using fallen logs and loose boulders to construct a crude funnel. As the wolves closed in, Joseph led a small group to draw their attention, while Alara and Talon lay in wait. The dire wolves charged, snarling and snapping. Joseph's group retreated, luring the pack into the narrow passage. At the last second, they dove aside. Alara and Talon sprung the trap, triggering an avalanche of rocks that sent the wolves fleeing in panic. "Impressive," Alara said, helping Joseph to his feet. "Perhaps you humans aren't so fragile after all." After 9 grueling days, Joseph's battered team finally reached the Wagnir outpost. They crouched behind a ridge, studying the formidable defenses. "Frontal assault is suicide," Talon muttered. Joseph nodded, his mind racing. "We'll split up. Alara, take the Wagnir and create a diversion at the main gate. Talon, you're with me. We'll find another way in." As Alara's group launched their assault, Joseph led a small team to a blind spot he'd identified in the base's sensor grid. They scaled the walls undetected, slipping inside just as alarms began to blare. "Disable their communications," Joseph ordered. "We need to keep them confused." They fought their way to the command center, Joseph's quick thinking and the team's diverse skills overcoming every obstacle. As they neared their objective, a massive Wagnir commander blocked their path. "You will go no further, human," he snarled. Joseph stepped forward, locking eyes with the towering alien. "I challenge you to Kreltak," he declared, invoking the ancient Wagnir ritual of single combat. The commander's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. "So be it." They circled each other in the confined space. The Wagnir attacked first, his powerful strikes threatening to pulverize Joseph, but the human's agility kept him just out of reach. Joseph noticed a pattern in his opponent's movements. He feinted left, then ducked under the Wagnir's guard. In one fluid motion, he swept the commander's legs and pinned him to the ground. "Yield," Joseph gasped, his arms straining to hold the massive alien. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then the commander relaxed. "I yield," he rumbled, The base is yours. As word of their victory spread, Joseph reunited with Alara and Talon. The three exchanged weary grins, a newfound respect evident in their eyes. They had survived the Gauntlet's challenges not as humans or Wagner, but as a team. The acrid stench of plasma burns and cordite hung heavy in the air as Joseph surveyed the aftermath of their hard-won victory. Crumbling walls and twisted metal littered the rebel base, testament to the ferocity of the assault. He wiped sweat and grime from his face, wincing as his fingers brushed a fresh cut above his eye. "Status report," he barked, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. Talon limped over, cradling his left arm. "We've secured the perimeter, but it's bad, Joseph. At least a dozen of our team are down or missing." Joseph's stomach clenched. He'd known the risk of splitting their forces, but the reality of their losses hit him like a physical blow. "Get me a full casualty count, and find Alara." As Talon moved off, Joseph picked his way through the rubble-strewn corridors. The flickering emergency lights cast eerie shadows, and the sporadic pop of cooling metal made him flinch. He found himself at the entrance to the command center he'd sabotaged earlier. The door hung askew on its hinges, wisps of acrid smoke still seeping from within. A groan caught his attention. Joseph spun, weapon raised, to find a human operative slumped against the wall. Blood seeped from a nasty gash on the man's thigh. "Hang on, soldier," Joseph said, kneeling to apply a pressure bandage. "We'll get you patched up." The operative grabbed Joseph's wrist. "Sir, they took Jensen and Kowalski. The other team, they pulled them out during the firefight." Joseph's blood ran cold. Captured, he'd pushed too hard, and now his people were paying the price. A commotion down the hall drew his attention. Alara's massive form filled the corridor, her scales scorched and dented in places. "Joseph," she called, "the overseers are here, they're tallying the results." He stood, helping the wounded operative to his feet. "Let's go face the music." They gathered in what remained of the base's main hall. Joseph's team looked battered and depleted next to the other, less damaged squads. A panel of stern-faced officers, both human and Wagner, stood before them. Colonel Hawkins stepped forward, his expression grim. "While your unorthodox tactics showed promise, Gordon, the losses you sustained have put your team in jeopardy of elimination." Joseph's fists clenched. "Sir, with all due respect, we completed the objective. And more importantly, we have team members unaccounted for, captured during the assault." Murmurs rippled through the assembled soldiers. A Wagner captain sneered. "Prisoners are part of the risk, human. The Gauntlet doesn't coddle the weak." "Bullshit," Joseph snapped, stepping forward. "This isn't about coddling. It's about leadership. A real commander never abandons their people." The captain's scales flushed dark with anger. "You dare lecture us on—" "He's right." Alara's voice boomed through the hall. She moved to stand beside Joseph, towering over him. "I've fought Joseph. I fought with him. He embodies the warrior spirit more than any human I've known. And any Wagner worth their salt knows that we leave no one behind." Joseph met her eyes, surprised by the fierce loyalty he saw there. He turned back to the panel. "This trial is about forging a unified fighting force. How can we do that if we're willing to sacrifice our own? I formally request the release of my captured team members before the next stage." Heated debate erupted among the overseers. Joseph stood his ground, acutely aware of the eyes of both species upon him. Finally, Colonel Hawkins raised a hand for silence. "Your argument has merit, Gordon," he said slowly. "And it appears you've earned the respect of your Wagner allies. Very well. Your captured operatives will be returned to you." Relief washed over Joseph, but he kept his expression neutral. "Thank you, sir." As the crowd dispersed, Alara clapped a massive hand on Joseph's shoulder. "Well fought, human, but the real battle is yet to come." Joseph nodded, watching as medics tended to his battered team. He knew she was right. They'd survived this crucible, but the Gauntlet was nowhere near the end. And with each trial, the stakes grew higher. He squared his shoulders, already planning their next move. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, human and Wagner alike. The klaxons blared, piercing the air with their urgent wail. Joseph Gordon sprinted through the corridors of the forward base, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He burst into the command center, sweat beading on his forehead. "Status report," he barked, eyes scanning the holographic display of Zephyria. A junior officer's fingers flew across the control panel. "Sir, enemy forces have seized the spaceport, power plants and comm relays. We're cut off from reinforcements." Joseph studied the map, his mind racing. Red icons spread across the terrain like a virus, engulfing key strategic points. Their single blue dot looked painfully isolated. "Damn it," he muttered. "Where's the rest of my team?" "About that, sir." The officer hesitated. "New orders from command. They've shuffled the rosters." Joseph's head snapped up. "What?" Before he could demand answers, the doors hissed open. Colonel Stavik strode in, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to Joseph's battle-worn gear. Behind him lumbered Kraxus, the Wognir's massive frame barely fitting through the doorway. "Gordon," Stavik said, his voice clipped. "Looks like we're stuck together for this one." Joseph's eyes narrowed. He and Stavik had butted heads more than once during training. "Where's Alara?" Kraxus rumbled, his gravelly voice filled with disdain. "Your Wognir friend is with the enemy now, as are many of our own." "A test of adaptability," Stavik added, though his tone suggested he found the situation distasteful. Joseph's mind raced, absorbing this new complication. He turned back to the holomap, studying the enemy's movements. A plan began to form. "We can't win this through conventional tactics," he said, zooming in on a heavily fortified structure deep behind enemy lines. "See this? It's their command and logistics hub. We take that out, we cripple their entire operation." Stavik scoffed. "With what army? We're outnumbered and outgunned." "We don't need an army," Joseph countered. "We need a surgical strike team, fast, silent, and deadly." Kraxus leaned in, his alien eyes gleaming with interest. "You propose to attack the heart of their defenses? It's madness." "It's our only shot," Joseph insisted. He outlined his plan, detailing the high-speed insertion and multi-pronged assault. Stavik paced, clearly torn. "It's risky as hell, Gordon. If we fail, we lose everything." "And if we do nothing, we lose anyway," Joseph shot back. "I've gotten us out of tighter spots than this." A tense silence fell over the room. Finally, Kraxus nodded his massive head. "The human has proven his worth in battle. I say we trust his instincts." Stavik sighed, then squared his shoulders. "All right, Gordon, we'll play it your way. But this better work." Joseph allowed himself a grim smile. "Gather our best operatives. We move out in 10 minutes. The next hours passed in a blur of frenetic activity. Joseph's strike team raced across the Zephyrian landscape in low-flying skimmers, hugging the terrain to avoid detection. They dodged patrols and slipped past defensive lines, every near miss sending Joseph's heart racing. As they approached the command nexus, Joseph keyed his comm. "Remember the plan. Kraxus, your team takes out their security forces. Stavik, hit their supply depots. I'll lead the push for the war room." They burst into the facility like ghosts, catching the defenders completely off guard. Alarms blared as chaos erupted. Joseph sprinted through the corridors, his team fanning out behind him. The sounds of combat echoed from all directions as Kraxus and Stavik's squads engaged the enemy. Joseph skidded to a halt outside the central war room, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He pulled a small device from his pack, the holographic decoy projector. With a deep breath, he activated it and kicked down the door. The room erupted into pandemonium. Multiple versions of Joseph seemed to appear from thin air, each one barking contradictory orders. In the confusion, he spotted Alara, her eyes wide with shock. "Stand down," Joseph shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Your forces are in disarray. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." For a moment, the outcome hung in the balance. Then slowly, Alara lowered her weapon. The other commanders followed suit, their faces a mix of anger and grudging respect. As the dust settled and the simulation ended, Joseph felt the adrenaline drain from his body. He sagged against a console, suddenly bone-weary. Ilara approached, her expression unreadable. "I never thought I'd see the day a human outmaneuvered me," she said. "Your tactics were impressive." Joseph managed a tired smile. "We both learned something today. About working together, adapting to the unexpected." She nodded slowly. Perhaps there's hope for this alliance after all. As they made their way to the victory celebration, Joseph allowed himself to feel a glimmer of optimism. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, he truly believed humans and Wagner could forge a lasting partnership. The acrid stench of plasma burns and cordite hung heavy in the air as Joseph surveyed the aftermath of their hard-won victory. Crumbling walls and twisted metal littered the rebel base, testament to the ferocity of the assault. He wiped sweat and grime from his face, wincing as his fingers brushed a fresh cut above his eye. Months had passed since the grueling gauntlet trials, and now Joseph found himself thrust into a position he never imagined, joint commander of the human Wagner Alliance forces on Zephyria. He stood on the bridge of the HSS Intrepid, staring at the holographic display of a neighboring Wagner colony world. Red warning indicators flashed across its surface, signaling the outbreak of civil unrest. "What's our ETA?" Joseph asked, his voice tight with tension. A young ensign checked her readouts. 2 hours until we reach the outer atmosphere, sir." Joseph nodded, his mind racing through potential strategies. He turned to face Ilara, her massive form dominating the far side of the command deck. "Any word from your contacts planet side?" Ilara's scales rippled with agitation. "Nothing good. The nationalists have seized control of major population centers. They're broadcasting non-stop anti-human rhetoric." The comm officer's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Sir, incoming transmission from the planet's surface." A harsh, guttural voice filled the bridge, dripping with contempt. "Attention, human vermin and Wagner traitors. This world belongs to true Wagner. Your corrupting influence ends here. Leave now or face annihilation." Joseph's eyes hardened. He keyed the comm system. "This is Commander Gordon of the Zephyrian Alliance. Stand down immediately and surrender control of the planet. This is your only warning." Laughter erupted from the speakers. "Your empty threats mean nothing, human. We will purge our society of your taint, whatever it takes." The transmission cut off abruptly. Joseph turned to Ilara, his expression grim. "Looks like we do this the hard way. Prepare the dropships." Hours later, Joseph crouched behind a makeshift barricade, plasma rounds screaming overhead. The beachhead his forces established was under heavy assault from nationalist troops. He tapped his comm unit. "Bravo team, status report." Static crackled, then a breathless voice responded. "Pinned down on the eastern flank, sir. Enemy armor advancing." Joseph's mind raced, analyzing the terrain. "Copy that. Charlie team, I need you to flank wide around that ridgeline, hit their tanks from behind." He peeked over the barricade, assessing the battlefield. To his left, Ilara's Wagner warriors pressed forward in a relentless frontal assault, drawing the bulk of the enemy fire. Joseph seized the opportunity. "All units push forward! Use Ilara's advance as cover!" The Allied forces surged ahead, catching the rebels in a devastating crossfire. Slowly but surely, they gained ground, pushing towards the heavily fortified capital city. As night fell, Joseph huddled with his command staff in a hastily erected field HQ. Holomaps flickered, showing the disposition of enemy forces. "Their comms array," Joseph said, pointing to a heavily defended structure near the city center. "That's the key. We take that out, we cut off their propaganda and disrupt their command structure." Ilara nodded, her alien features set in a fierce expression. "A bold move, but the facility is heavily guarded." Joseph allowed himself a grim smile. "Then we'll just have to be bolder." In the pre-dawn light, Joseph led a small team of elite operatives through the war-torn streets of the capital. They moved silently, using the shadows and rubble for cover. As they approached the communications facility, the sound of heavy gunfire erupted from the far side of the city. "Right on schedule," Joseph muttered. Alara's diversionary attack was drawing away the bulk of the enemy forces. They sprinted across an open plaza, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. Joseph's heart pounded as they reached the base of the massive comm tower. "Charges set," one of his team reported. "Ready to blow the door." Joseph nodded. "Do it." The explosion rocked the ground, and they surged forward through the smoke and debris. Inside, they fought their way up level after level, facing fierce resistance from the nationalist troops. Joseph's team dwindled as they ascended, good soldiers falling to enemy fire. Finally, they reached the control room. Joseph's remaining operatives secured the perimeter as he strode to the main console. His fingers flew across the controls, overriding security protocols and seizing command of the planet's communication network. He keyed the broadcast system, his voice ringing out across the entire colony. "Attention, citizens. This is Commander Joseph Gordon of the Zephyrian Alliance. Your nationalist leaders have lied to you. Their rebellion is crumbling as we speak." He paused, letting his words sink in. "To the rebel forces still fighting, your cause is lost. Lay down your weapons and surrender. To those who have been misled by propaganda, know this. Humans and Wagner can work together. We can build a better future, united." As Joseph's message echoed across the planet, Ilara's forces launched their final assault on the nationalist stronghold. Caught between the disruption of their communications and the fury of the Wagner attack, the rebel leadership crumbled. In the days that followed, Joseph worked tirelessly to establish a new, moderate government on the colony world. He met with local leaders, emphasizing the benefits of cooperation between humans and Wagner. As the situation stabilized, Joseph found himself in a quiet moment with Ilara, overlooking the recovering city. "You fought well, human," Ilara rumbled, a note of respect in her voice. Joseph nodded, exhaustion etched on his features. "We both did, but this is just the beginning." Ilara's massive form shifted. "Indeed, many of my people still resist the idea of true partnership with humans." "Then we'll keep showing them what we can accomplish together," Joseph said, his voice filled with quiet tenacity. As they stood there, an odd pair united by shared struggle, Joseph knew the hardest battles were yet to come. But for the first time, he truly believed they had a chance at forging a lasting peace between their species. Joseph wiped the sweat from his brow as he stepped off the shuttle onto the scorching surface of Wagner Prime, the Wagner homeworld. The air felt thick and oppressive, laden with tension that matched the planet's sweltering climate. Ilara towered beside him, her scales glistening in the harsh sunlight. "Ready for this?" Joseph asked, his voice low. Ilara's multifaceted eyes narrowed, as ready as one can be when facing down centuries of ingrained prejudice. They strode toward the imposing council chambers, a massive structure of twisted metal and stone that seemed to defy gravity. Joseph's gaze swept the crowded plaza, noting the hostile glares from traditionalist Wagner. His hand instinctively tightened on his sidearm. Inside the cavernous hall, the cacophony of voices hit Joseph like a physical force. Hundreds of Wagner elders filled the tiered seats, their heated arguments echoing off the vaulted ceiling. As Joseph and Ilara took their places at the speaker's podium, a hush fell over the assembly. Joseph cleared his throat. "Esteemed elders of the Wagner High Council, I come before you today not as a conqueror or invader, but as an ally. Humanity has fought and bled alongside your people. We've—" A thunderous roar drowned out his words. Elders leapt to their feet, shouting and gesticulating wildly. "Silence the human filth. We will not be polluted by lesser races. Death to the despoilers!" Joseph's words died in his throat as he stared out at the sea of rage. Ilara stepped forward, her massive form radiating authority. "Enough!" Her bellow shook the chamber. "Is this how the proud Wagner conduct themselves? Like squabbling hatchlings?" A tense quiet settled over the room. Joseph opened his mouth to continue, but a deafening explosion rocked the building. Screams erupted as acrid smoke filled the air. Joseph's combat instincts kicked in. "Ilara, secure the perimeter," he shouted, already sprinting towards a group of elders trapped beneath fallen debris. Joseph's muscles strained as he lifted a twisted beam, allowing 3 stunned elders to crawl to safety. The heat from spreading fires seared his skin as he pressed deeper into the chaos. Coughing and choking, he guided disoriented council members towards the exits. A secondary blast knocked Joseph off his feet. His head slammed against the floor, vision blurring. Through the haze, he saw a young Wagner aide pinned beneath a fallen column, crying out in pain. Gritting his teeth against the agony in his ribs, Joseph crawled forward. "Hold on, I've got you," he grunted, bracing his shoulder against the column. With a roar of effort, he heaved upward. The aide scrambled free just as Joseph's strength gave out. He collapsed, gasping for air in the smoke-filled chamber. Strong hands gripped his shoulders, hauling him to his feet. Ilara's face swam into focus. "Joseph, we must go, now!" They stumbled out into the sunlight. Emergency crews swarmed the plaza as dazed council members huddled in shocked clusters. Joseph's legs buckled, but Ilara's steadying grip kept him upright. A hush fell over the crowd as an ancient Wagner elder approached, his robes singed and torn. He fixed Joseph with an unreadable stare. "Human," the elder's voice crackled, "you risked your life for our people today." Joseph straightened, fighting the urge to cough. It was the right thing to do. We're stronger together than we are apart. The elder nodded slowly. Perhaps there is wisdom in your words after all." As medical teams tended to the wounded, Joseph saw other elders engaging in heated discussions. Some gesticulated angrily, while others nodded thoughtfully. The tide of opinion had shifted, but the outcome remained far from certain. Ilara leaned close, her voice a low rumble. "This attack has shaken them, but many still cling to the old ways. We have a long fight ahead." Joseph squared his shoulders, ignoring the pain that flared through his body. "Then we'd better get started." Joseph wiped sweat from his brow as he scanned the latest casualty reports. The air in the command center felt heavy, thick with tension and the acrid smell of fear. Screens flashed red alerts, each one signaling another devastating blow to the fragile alliance he'd worked so hard to build. "Sir, we've lost contact with Outpost Zeta," a young lieutenant reported, his voice cracking. "That's the 3rd one this week." Joseph's lips pursed. He turned to Ilara, her massive form hunched over a tactical display. "How bad?" Ilara's scales rippled with agitation. "Bad. The insurgents are targeting our supply lines. If this keeps up, we'll be cut off within days." A thunderous explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared as smoke billowed through shattered windows. Joseph sprinted to a nearby console, fingers flying over the controls. His heart sank as grainy footage appeared on screen. Bodies, human and Wagner alike, sprawled across the rubble-strewn plaza of what had once been the human embassy. A child's doll lay amid the carnage, its plastic smile a grotesque mockery of the surrounding devastation. "Those bastards," Joseph growled, banging his hand on the console. "They're trying to tear us apart." Ilara's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "And it's working. Look." She gestured to another screen. Crowds of Wagner filled the streets, their voices a cacophony of rage and fear. Signs bobbed above the throng. "Humans go home. No more integration. Remember the embassy." Joseph's mind raced. Everything they'd fought for was unraveling before his eyes. He turned to Ilara, his expression grim. "We need to end this. Now." Hours later, Joseph crouched in the shadows of a massive cliff face, the jagged rock digging into his back. A dozen elite operatives huddled nearby, their faces hidden behind cutting-edge stealth masks. The air shimmered around them, adaptive camouflage rendering them nearly invisible. Joseph's voice was barely a whisper. "Remember, we get in, we take out the leadership, we get out. Clean and quick." Ilara's massive form loomed beside him. "And if we can't take them alive?" Joseph's eyes hardened. Then we make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Ever. They moved silently through the night, their path lit only by the faint glow of distant moons. As they approached the bunker entrance, Joseph held up a fist. Something felt wrong. A burst of plasma fire erupted from the darkness. Joseph dove for cover, his heart pounding. "It's a trap! Fall back!" But it was too late. Enemy forces poured from hidden bunkers, their weapons cutting through the night. Joseph watched in horror as his team was cut down around him. "How did they know?" Ilara roared, her massive frame providing cover for the surviving operatives. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Because I told them." Private Jenkins stepped into view, his face twisted with hate. "They showed me the truth about you, Commander, about how humans are poisoning the Wagner way of life." Joseph's blood ran cold. He'd trusted Jenkins, mentored him. Now the young Marine's betrayal might cost them everything. The battle raged for hours, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. Joseph and Ilara fought side by side, their movements a deadly dance honed by years of partnership. But for every enemy they felled, two more took their place. As dawn broke, Joseph found himself cornered in the command center, surrounded by the broken bodies of friend and foe alike. Ilara stood beside him, her once pristine scales now scorched and bloodied. "Joseph," she rumbled, her voice heavy with exhaustion, "we can't win this." He nodded, his hand hovering over a small device on his belt. The last resort, the weapon that could end it all. "I know," he said softly, "but we can make sure they don't either." With a heavy heart, Joseph activated the device. A countdown appeared on his heads-up display. 60 seconds. He looked at Ilara, his closest friend and ally. "It's been an honor." She placed a massive claw on his shoulder. "The honor was mine, human." As the seconds ticked away, Joseph thought of all they'd fought for, of the dream of unity that now lay in ashes around them. He closed his eyes and waited for the end. The world exploded in light and heat. The bunker crumbled, taking Joseph, Ilara, and the nationalist leadership with it. In that final, fiery moment, the divide between human and Wagner was erased, replaced by the shared oblivion of death. Miles away, Colonel Hawkins watched the massive fireball rise into the sky. His weathered face showed no emotion as he bent to retrieve a charred piece of metal from the scorched earth. Joseph's combat insignia, warped and blackened by the inferno. Talon approached, his eyes fixed on the grim token. Hawkins placed it in the younger man's hand without a word. Talon's fingers closed around the insignia, feeling the weight of all it represented. He looked to the stars, still visible in the pre-dawn sky, and wondered what future lay ahead for their fractured alliance. The air grew thick with ash and...
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.